So I left off with the section, what in Christ's name do they have people worshiping? And I want to move right along to Pope Francis's recent words about libertarians. The Pope made these comments in the recent past about libertarianism. The philosophy that generally says, I want to be allowed to be left alone, to exercise my rights and live as a free individual, and leave others alone to do the same, which is essentially what libertarianism is. You know, voluntary behavior, non-coercive behavior, live and let live. Here's what the Pope of the current church said about libertarians and libertarianism. Quote, I cannot fail to speak of the grave risks associated with the invasion of libertarian individualism at high strata of culture and education. A common characteristic of this fallacious paradigm is that it minimizes the common good. Libertarianism is a more radical form of individualism that asserts that only the individual gives values to things and to interpersonal relations, and therefore only the individual decides what is good and what is evil. Libertarianism preaches that the idea of self-causation is necessary to ground freedom and individual responsibility. Thus, the libertarian individual denies the value of the common good. On the one hand, he supposes that the very idea of common means the constriction of at least some individuals, and on the other hand, that the notion of good deprives freedom of its essence. Libertarianism is an anti-social radicalization of individualism, which leads to the conclusion that everyone has the right to extend himself as far as his abilities allow him, even at the cost of the exclusion and marginalization of the more vulnerable majority. According to this mentality, all relationships that create ties must be eliminated, since they would limit freedom, and only by living independently of others, of the common good, and even God himself can a person be free. Could you even imagine the absolute fraudulent lies that are embedded in this diatribe? I mean, this is no Christian. This is a verminous piece of trash to try to convince people that a simple philosophy of live and let live is an ideology of pure selfishness and individualism run rampant, and saying that they believe that what they decide is good and evil. No, that's not what libertarians and anarchists think at all. They believe there's a standard for morality and that people should not infringe on other people's rights and freedom because it's immoral to do so. This guy wouldn't know anything about that because he is an immoral pedophile protector. So, before I leave this part of the presentation, I want to send out a challenge to our so-called Pope. Come to Philadelphia and let's go down to the arena where the old ECW arena is and meet me in the cage, and we'll settle our differences that way. You know, I hereby challenge the Pope to an MMA fight. Because God knows he can't beat me philosophically. I mean, that wouldn't even be a challenge, you know. I'll give him half a fighting chance that way. Understanding the occult, as I said, is one of the critical aspects of really being spiritually awake. You know, we have to stop thinking about this notion of the occult being something that is evil and understand that it's hidden knowledge. The word occult is derived from the Latin occultus, meaning hidden. It is the study of the hidden laws of nature, those which are at work in the invisible, mental, spiritual domain, far more than those that are at work in the visible or physical world. Therefore, occultism involves the acceptance of a much wider worldview than that which is ordinarily taken by the everyday person. The occultists then may be defined as those who study all the laws of nature, both those that are readily seen and those which are much more difficult to see with the physical eyes or measuring instruments alone. Knowing how the science of these greater laws work, the occultist must then decide whether to work in harmony with these laws and help to create light and order and freedom, or to rage against those laws and join the forces of darkness and chaos. Contrary to what fake Christians will tell you, a true Christian will not shy away from the study of the occult. To understand the occult is to grasp the workings of universal moral law, so as not to create self-inflicted suffering and chaos in our lives or the world. Genuine occultism is a science based upon knowledge. It is not a belief-based system or a religion. No one can consider themselves to be enlightened without an understanding of natural law, which is most certainly a part of occult studies, whether anyone agrees with or likes that fact. Understanding natural law means understanding that right and wrong are literally built into the fabric and intelligence of creation. The existence of these occult laws and the understanding of how they work is the very foundation of true morality. Natural law governs behavioral choice and brings about consequences for behavior, both positive and negative. The knowledge of how these universal moral laws work allows us to take control over the effects we experience based on the actions we choose. We have free will to choose our behavior, but we cannot be insulated from the consequences of our behavior. Each behavioral choice carries consequence with it, and humanity will unavoidably experience the consequences of our aggregate behavioral choices. This knowledge is what the dark occultist is laboring to subvert. The manipulators use human beings to do their evil bidding, but those they manipulate will not escape the bulk of karmic consequence because they took the harmful actions and are therefore responsible for the resultant harm. This is why human beings must look into these occulted spiritual laws. It is the very knowledge that your enemy is using to conquer you, and simultaneously the only knowledge that will free you from your servitude. Those who do not understand the occult are not truly awake, and they certainly aren't true Christians. The book of Hosea chapter 4 says, "My people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you from being priest for me, because you have forgotten the law of your God. And so I will also forget your children." A quote from the Old Testament. And from Corinthians, from the New Testament, "The weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh." The weapons of this spiritual warfare lies in the mental domain. It lies in the realm of knowledge and how it is being used against us. The importance of understanding the occult continued. A primary factor that prevents people from being awake is their lack of understanding of occult knowledge. Fake Christians lack this same essential factor of true spiritual awakening. We must understand that dark occultists are essentially ancient psychologists who use their knowledge of the human psyche against those who remain ignorant of how the mind works. We must learn the very same occulted knowledge that the ruling class understands about how the human psyche works and how it can be manipulated. And that's what the occult actually is. In fact, de-occulting this knowledge and bringing it out into the open for everyone to see, hear, and understand is the only thing that will ever have the potential to truly level the playing field in favor of human freedom. The ancient social engineers who designed the worldwide system of enslavement are the same priest class that invented the false exoteric religions of the world. They are the same priest class who invented and used the media, past and present, for the purposes of mind controlling the naive and ignorant public. So, this image here is a depiction of the ritual that takes place yearly in the California redwoods called the Bohemian Grove, and the ritual is known as the cremation of care. And they are literally immolating care. They call it dull care. They want to destroy the empathy that a normal human being would experience in doing the evil work that they do. And thus the ritual is the burning away of one's conscience. That is what it ritualistically symbolizes. The immolation of conscience. Now these occultists, will say, will put their media on this and say, there's nothing to see here. Nothing whatsoever to see there. It's just the world's power brokers all gathering in the same place. Media moguls, entertainment figures, heads of worldwide multinational corporations, all gathered, all planning and plotting together on how they're going to increase their sphere of influence and control. All completely unreported by the mainstream media, telling you to look the other way. Don't pay any attention to that. Multi-billionaires gathering in the same place in some weird, twisted, sick, demonic rituals. There's nothing to it. Yeah. Both the cultural, exoteric religions and the media will do everything in their power to dismiss any investigation into the occult, either as being nonsense or evil, so you shouldn't look into it, thus dissuading the public from the discovery of any aspect of occult knowledge. Conscience, the only way to freedom. The dark occult ruling class gives exoteric religion to the masses to get them away from the core esoteric spiritual truth of natural law. These occultists know that the occultation of natural law will always be what keeps the masses enslaved and the ruling class in control. Under natural law, the law of freedom, as I refer to it, eternally governs the state of freedom of any society anywhere in the universe. The law of freedom states that as morality increases in the aggregate of any given population of souls, that society's collective freedom will also increase. Conversely, as any society's aggregate morality declines, that society's freedom will proportionately decline. In other words, as morality increases, freedom increases, and as morality declines, freedom declines. This is how natural law works. And so then you only need to look to the experience that we are undergoing. Are we gaining freedom or are we losing freedom? And therefore you will know in the aggregate percentage numbers, percentage-wise, whether we are becoming a more moral population or a more immoral population. And I think the verdict is clear. This is why the only prescription that Jesus ever gave for freedom in the New Testament scriptures was know the truth. Didn't ask anybody to believe in anything. Didn't ask them to believe that he was the Son of God. Didn't ask them to worship him. Didn't ask them to believe that he was, anything but someone who understood how the natural law worked and to try to live according to it. He didn't ask anybody to set up a religion in his name. That's all what people after his existence did. He was referring to the truth regarding our own individual sovereignty, the truth that there is no legitimacy to the notion of earthly authority, and knowing the truth of the difference between right behavior, which does not cause harm to other living beings or their rights or property, and wrong behavior, which does cause harm to other living beings or their rights or property. This knowledge comprises true conscience, and it is the only thing that can ever make humanity free, according to the law of freedom, which can never be undone or escaped. As morality in the aggregate increases, a society becomes more free. As morality in the aggregate declines, a society becomes more enslaved. This is what is meant in the New Testament scriptures as the figure of Jesus, representing the consciousness that he had, being referred to as the way, the truth, and the life. This doesn't mean that it's that he is some God man that needs to be worshipped. This is about following the example set according to the Jesus figure in the New Testament. That's the way of freedom, the truth of natural law, the way to life and not death and destruction and chaos. See, I did this entire presentation on what real Christianity is about as opposed to the fake variant that people have been given. Because even in the exoteric sense, I consider that Christianity is a religion that is to be held to a higher moral standard. The cornerstone of true Christianity is a high moral aspiration embodied in the Golden Rule. The Golden Rule challenges people to treat others the way that they themselves would want to be treated and not to violate other people's rights, just as you don't want your own rights to be violated. This is why I personally hold the religion of Christianity, even in its many exoteric, variants, to higher moral standards than all other world religions, and therefore why I chose to make it the focus of this presentation instead of any other religious belief system. The Golden Rule is a true representation of a higher level of consciousness for those who subscribe to it and attempt to live by it. And it's so simple, it's almost stupid. You don't want something done to you because it's harmful? Don't do it to other people. That's really the apophatic version of the Golden Rule. Don't do unto others what you don't want done unto you. And to say it in the positive sense is just treat others the way you want to be treated. And yet, the vast majority of human beings cannot understand this. Certainly, they're not living by it. Christianity and some of its similarities to Buddhism. Buddhism, in its exoteric form, shares many similar aspects to Christianity in its embodiment of the solar savior figure of Buddha, who in his earthly incarnation and name went by Siddhartha Gautama. In its pure state, Buddhism is an esoteric philosophy which teaches natural law via the Four Noble Truths, which are tenets which outline the causal factors for human suffering and the result that we receive experientially in the real world based upon our actions, which is karma. Buddhism also discusses the remedy by which we can alleviate that suffering by changing our behavior through the methodology of the Eightfold Path. That is an understanding of natural law. It is the knowledge of the causal factors of human suffering and what we can do to alleviate that by changing those factors at the causal level. True Buddhism explains how we experience exactly what we create, the karmic consequences of our own free will behavioral choices. In its esoteric aspect, Buddhism can be said to be on a similar level of consciousness to true Christianity. Buddhism and the New Age, or as I like to call it, the New Cage movement. Just as there is fake Christianity, there are degraded forms of Buddhism which seek to embed in people a pseudo-spiritual message of total acceptance of everything, even injustice, evil, and slavery. The New Cage religious belief system is essentially a heavily modified, perverted form of Buddhism. Unfortunately, there is no such thing as meditating your way to enlightenment and world peace. This Buddhism in name only is a form of psychological warfare which makes people largely inactive observers, preventing them from ever taking any real-world action against the evildoers who are violating their natural rights and sovereignty. The lost years of Jesus. Whether or not the New Testament figure of Jesus was a historical person or not, the biblical stories about him suggest that he left his home of Judea shortly after his childhood for many years before returning to the land of his birth and beginning his spiritual ministry. In the minds of the spiritually initiated, this can mean but one thing. Jesus traveled to Egypt during his so-called lost years and was himself initiated into the knowledge of natural law through the Commission mystery schools of ancient Egypt. Just like they tried to suppress the resurgence of the mystery schools that were being taught at Alexandria, the new Roman-sanctioned state religion of official Christianity, or Constantinianity as I call it, began the suppression of the early true Christians, the Gnostics. The philosophies upon which esoteric Christianity is based predates the 1st century AD accounts of Jesus by thousands of years. Gnosticism, which comes from the Greek word gnostikos, meaning possessing knowledge, and that in turn is derived from the Greek noun gnosis, which means knowledge, was a 1st and 2nd century religious system whose adherents wrote and practiced a pre-Christian form of the philosophy that Jesus studied and taught. Naturally, such esoteric knowledge had to be purged from early exoteric Christianity by dark occultists and the early church in order to ensure that the potentially transformative power of Gnosticism did not gain a foothold in the Roman Empire and threaten the power of the entrenched ruling class. The Nag Hammadi scriptures and other Gnostic texts, such as the Pistis Sophia or Faith Wisdom, contained ideas that the rulers of that time certainly did not want spreading far and wide. These teachings included an awareness of the unseen world, or the occult, which encompassed the existence of cosmic moral law, which governs the consequences of free will-based behavior. The Gnostics were teaching and understood natural law at their core of their philosophy. Exposing the rulership of what the Gnostics called the archons, the masters, the ruling class of the earth. Some people would say that they were non-human entities, the archons, either subtle, hyperdimensional or extra-dimensional beings, or even extraterrestrial beings. Regardless of what their nature was, their plan is the same: to control, to dominate, to manipulate, and to enslave. That's why I like to call anarchy anarchony. You know, the word anarchy comes from anarchon, the absence of masters or a ruling class. It doesn't mean chaos, as we'll get to. Rejection of all archonic false authority in favor of the true authority of the universal Creator's moral law. This is what the Gnostics practiced and preached and accepted. They knew there was no legitimate authority in man. No such thing. The only authority is the law of the Creator. The concept that true spirituality was ultimately about waking up from worldly illusion created by incorrect, irrational, and immoral thinking. They coined the concept waking up from illusion. We still use this term today in spiritual movements. Karmic consequence accrued over multiple lifetimes, which was completely wiped out from the canonical scriptures in the Council of Nicaea. The existence of 3 distinct types of human soul groups. This may be one of the most interesting Gnostic philosophies, because it may explain why we have such a difficulty in waking people up to truth. They considered these 3 different soul groups to be different classifications of spirituality within human beings. The first group were known as the Hylics, Hylics, Hylics. And they were this was the class of human beings that was completely identified with materialism and base instincts. They only identified with the physical body and the material world. They were spiritually unconscious, and they would be extremely difficult or impossible to awaken because they were so rooted in the ego and so rooted in the flesh. They never even considered spiritual matters. They never turned their mind to it at all. So that's the Hylics. Then they had a group of human beings that they classified as the psychics. The people who had some form of spiritual consciousness. They were somewhat embedded in mind. They could conceive, they could have conceptual thought processes. But they only really grasped spirituality from a simplified emotional perspective, rather than from a place of true, deeply rooted knowledge, or in other words, occultism. And the Gnostics considered that the psychics were possible to wake up, but with some effort. You had to put a lot of effort. They were fence sitters, in other words. You could bring the knowledge to them and they would listen, at least with an open mind, maybe consider it, and maybe they'd move a little bit in consciousness in a lifetime. And maybe you could wake some of them up fully. And then some of them, they didn't wake up and they went back into the illusion. And then the third group was known as the pneumatics. I love the name. And, it comes from the Greek word pneuma, meaning spirit. And these were those who were spiritually awakened. They were, the high consciousness soul group. They were elects or adepts who incarnate to become teachers of spiritual knowledge. The pneumatics. And, how many people have ever heard this? Ever. 1, 2, 3. 3 in the room. Okay? So even people who, study this type of esoteric information and spirituality, it's buried. They don't want people understanding this. The early church didn't want people understanding this. Certainly the ruling class doesn't want them understanding it. So what other horrors did the early church conduct, aside from the suppression of the Gnostics? The genocide of the Albigensians. One of the most brutal treatments of people anywhere and at any time period in history. This is where some of the most ruthless medieval torture came out of, from people who considered themselves Christian and holy people. The work of purging inconvenient competing spiritual knowledge was certainly not limited to the early church. Most people have heard of the Christian crusades of the Middle Ages. These military campaigns included the infamous Albigensian Crusade of the early 13th century. The Albigensian Crusade was a 20-year military campaign initiated by Pope Innocent III to eliminate the Christian sect known as the Cathars. This is where we get the word cathartic. The Cathars in the Languedoc region of southern France. While the Cathars they could be considered an extremist ascetic sect. They really believed in the purging of the physical and the primacy of the spiritual, which was sort of imbalanced. And they really lived a very ascetic lifestyle. They still taught against the idea of false authority being vested in any worldly institutions, especially church or state. So you could consider that they were anarchists, or at least anarchic. And I'm telling you, the ways that they were tortured is, the realm of nightmares. Here's Pope Innocent, very innocent. He said, anyone who attempts to construe a personal view of God which conflicts with church dogma must be burned without pity. And he's not talking about like spiritually burned or like, I'm going to really light you up verbally. He meant burned with fire to the death. And they lit people on fire, doused them in oil, lit them on fire. Very Christian of them. Very Christ-like. They broke people at the rack, putting them on a torture wheel and snapping their bones with hammers, or stretching them, lighting fires under their feet, burning all the skin off their feet till they bled out. The strappado was another medieval instrument of torture, where somebody's arms were tied behind their back, and then they were hoisted up via a pulley system with their arms behind their back and all their weight, and eventually they would suffocate like that. It's like crucifixion. Very Christian behavior. And, the souls that underwent this torture, I still think they're not at rest. From understanding some of the stories of the Languedoc region of southern France, these souls are still, wandering in some cases and not at peace because of the kind of tortures that they underwent. That's what the early church did and the medieval church did. Fake Christians, if there ever were. I want to do this whole section on atheism because I don't want people getting the impression I'm an atheist. I'm not a traditional Christian. I'm an esoteric Christian. I'm a person who understands natural law and who understands occultism. But I'm certainly no atheist. I think atheism is a deplorable ideology. I think it's a childish ideology. I think it's an ideology that says, my mind, is all there is in the universe. There's nothing higher than that. This is all there is. Life is one and done. forget consciousness, forget, this being a realm of growth and experience and spiritual learning. No, it's just lights out and eternal blackness. Well, you're free to believe that, certainly, as foolish as I think the belief is, but I don't think that's going to really be any kind of an incentive to improve anything, least of all yourself. Certainly not the human condition. In general, to be an atheist means that one believes that there is no God, creator, or higher power. Atheists discount the existence of the spiritual domain. They believe that the universe is only governed by physical laws, which came from nothing for no reason or purpose. They believe that there are no spiritual laws which govern behavior. They believe the universe is essentially a random, chaotic place, so it is up to man himself to impose order upon each other and dominion over nature. Atheists take on the materialistic and existential worldview that the physical world is all there is, and there is no consciousness beyond our life on earth. Yet, folks, and this is why I call them the statheists, because they are statists almost invariably. I can't take credit for that. My drummer Dan actually came up with that. So I'll credit him there. At least that's who I heard it first from. I don't know if he made it up. But if he did, that's awesome. Almost all atheists are religionists. See, just because they don't accept a higher power or a God, do not think they do not have a religion. Because atheists have a religion, my friends. And that religion is called government. Almost every atheist I know devoutly believes in this religion. They pray at the altar of government, the most dangerous religion on the face of the earth, because it is firmly rooted in coercion and violence. They also pray at the altar of scientism, not true science. They pray at scientism's altar. This is the form of state-funded, quote-unquote, science, whose decrees they accept and believe in with religious fervor. So yeah, atheists do have their religions. It's called government and science, scientism. Make no mistake about it, the atheist mindset is the death of care. In this worldview, there is little incentive to improve consciousness or morality, and no incentive whatsoever to end the human slavery called government. Atheism is and always has been the pathway to spiritual death, which is why governments and the ruling class love atheism. They love it when this ideology infects the minds of the masses. This is also the reason why atheists were, are, and always probably will be banned from being students at any and every mystery tradition school ever upon the face of the earth. And you could probably say, except this one. I'll try to teach an atheist, but not with much hope. I won't really give him too much time. I'll be like, I'll explain to you what I have come to understand, but, you want to go on this, tirade about man's the highest power in creation. It's just like, that kind of foolishness, the old saying, you play silly games, you win silly prizes. Well, you're winning some silly prizes with that mentality because the earth is headed into total tyranny and slavery. And it's based on these erroneous ideologies of religion, money, atheism, scientism, etc. The belief in government and authority. These are all religions. So I say, God save us from the statheists. The mystery tradition schools viewed atheists as completely incapable of learning the truth of natural law and how it works. Atheists do not accept that they are subject to universal spiritual laws because they deny the very existence of the creator of those laws. Atheists believe that man is the highest power in creation, which is why they have been considered unteachable by every esoteric philosophical school of thought in human history, including the Commission mystery schools, including Freemasonry, including Rosicrucianism, including the schools at Delphi, the ancient Greek mystery traditions at Delphi and Eleusis. Every one of the mystery traditions nullified atheists in their ranks. And they said, come back when you accept that a higher power than man exists. And that's still done today in the Masonic lodges and Rosicrucian lodges. Atheist anarchists, quote unquote, often use the slogan, no gods, no masters. You see this big in the punk rock scene especially. Believe me, I know, because I hang out in that scene a lot. And, there's a ton of atheists in it. There's a ton of stateists in it, rabid statists, rabid leftists, rabid communists. And let me tell you what another thing there is in that scene. Nihilists. Nihilism is just rampant in the heavy music scene in general, of any kind of extreme or heavy music. Just people who say, humanity's fucked, don't care about anything. We feel sorry for the people who do care about anything, they'll say. I'm like, you don't understand. I don't care creates a prison for all of us. That's the exact dynamic that's going to put you in a prison. And I don't mean a physical prison. I mean a spiritual prison and a prison of tyranny on earth. They use this phrase, no gods, no masters, implying that the natural law of morality does not exist. Without an understanding that a higher power than mankind does exist, and without an understanding of the consequences of natural law, a proper understanding of true morality can never be truly achieved. Atheists and others who dwell in such deep spiritual ignorance will inevitably lead the world only toward more chaos. The phrase shouldn't be no gods, no masters, folks. The proper saying of what anarchy really is no masters, no slaves. That's what anarchy is. Fake Christians don't know what Satanism really is. They have this Hollywood, B-movie imagination of what Satanism is as an actual religion. And I'm telling you, their head is up their ass on this one. And there's no telling them. I tell people, look, if you want to know about Islam, you'd probably want to go to an imam at a mosque and ask them about Islam because they're a priest in that religion. If you want to know about Judaism, you'd probably go to a Jewish rabbi in a synagogue and ask them about Judaism because they're a priest in that religion. You want to go and learn about at least exoteric Christianity, you might want to go find, a Catholic or a Protestant priest in a church and ask them about their religion. Well, folks, I was a priest in Satanism. I was a priest in one of the largest bodies of public Satanism that exists on the earth, called the Church of Satan under Anton LaVey, who personally appointed me as a priest in the Church of Satan. So you would think that a former priest, would know a little bit about the tenets and doctrine of the satanic religion, would you not? Yet, I'll have Christians tell me, so-called Christians tell me, no, what you're saying isn't Satanism. Satanism is the worship of this being that is this devil depicted, and it's Lucifer, and it's the archenemy of God, etc. And I'm trying to explain to them, you don't understand. This is a worldly, it's an ideology, a way of living in the world. It has tenets and things that you actually do, and ways that you actually behave, and ways that you actually think. This isn't just about going out into the woods and lighting bonfires and sacrificing animals or dressing in black robes. This is not what Satanism is. It's part of fake Christian belief that they know what Satanism is and other people don't. I've been trying to expose real Satanism for the last 15 years of my life. I'm telling you, people still don't get it. They won't take it from somebody who is an actual priest in the religion. It's like having the playbook of the other football team and taking it across, to the other coach and saying, "Listen, here's all the plays they're going to run," and they're like, "Get out of here! I don't want to hear that. We'll do this our way." Can't even give them the playbook. That's how dumb they are. The dark occult controllers of our world manipulate the masses of people by giving them their mindset and their religion. This is the best way to have them continue fighting and weaken each other so that they are easier to control and rule. See, they give people little watered-down variants of their own religion and their own mindset. They're still the big chiefs and the big priests of this religion, and they still have the big satanic mindset. They give people the smaller one because the bigger can control the smaller. I call it mini-me Satanism, is my little coined term for it. They're Dr. Evil, and they give the public the mini-me version. This is the best, okay, so an understanding of true Christianity. In an understanding of true Christianity, you must understand what its polar, mistake in the slide again, I apologize. To understand true Christianity, you must understand what its polar opposite, Satanism, really is. Fake Christians refuse to understand genuine Satanism, but an authentic Christian has knowledge of the occult and can discern between light occultism and dark occultism based on how that knowledge is being used. Satanism is an ancient occult religion comprised of diverse, interconnected networks of worldwide adherents. At its ideological core, here's what Satanism really is. This religion postulates that knowledge of the human psyche and knowledge of the laws of the universe should be occulted or hidden and held only by a few human beings. It is much more accurate to perceive Satanists and dark occultists in general as ancient psychologists, as I've said many times, who hold and wield hidden information in ways which exploit those who remain ignorant of that information. The belief in Satan as an anthropomorphic deity instead of a set of ego-driven values and a way of being in the world is a misconception which leads people to a lack of understanding of real Satanism's agenda and their control and manipulation of our world. And it leads them to an inability to identify the true enemy. This is how I described the network of Satanism and dark occultism in my presentation called Demystifying the Occult, Part 2, Satanism and the Dark Occult. You have the general public that they want to exploit and use to do their bidding and to do their dark, evil work. And so they take them into the lower ranks. They filtrate. They have a vetting and filtration system of publicly known dark occult organizations. These are very low-level organizations as such that I was involved in. I'm not telling you I was up there with the absolute elite of the world, because I was not. I was at this level above the general public, at the bottom of that pyramid. Church of Satan, Temple of Set, Order of the Evil Eye, etc., so forth. You're talking about vetting and filtration systems where they're trying to identify what skills do you have, how can you help us? How can you do our great work of evil? Then you get up to higher level and you get the financial, political, and religious and media organizations that are controlled by these occultists at the highest level. Governments of the world, banking institutions of the world, media institutions, exoteric religious institutions. You go to a higher level above that in this pyramid of control, and you get to the higher level dark occult orders and think tank organizations. Now you're into Council on Foreign Relations. You're into the Royal Institute for International Affairs, the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. But even above them, there's a higher level of the dark occult, and this is the ancient ruling class bloodlines. This is the sector that you do not join, and there is no initiation into. You are born into it through blood, the end. That's it. And that's who's ultimately this priest class at the top is. They're the black Venetian nobility. That's right. And people better get that through their heads. They need to understand that. You're not born into the quote-unquote, you're not accepted into the ranks of the so-called dark Illuminati. You're born into it. That's it. And you don't leave it either when you're up at that level. At my level, you say, I'm done with this and I want to get out. And they're like, get the fuck out of here, boy. We don't need you. We were using you. That's it. I was being used like a pawn in a game I had no knowledge of and didn't understand at all. You know, when the pawn says, I don't want to be involved anymore, they're like, well, get off the board. Don't bother us, though. You know, I don't know where the bodies are buried, so to speak. I never got into that level. My conscience never let me get into that level. But you get into that level and you do know where the bodies are buried, you're not walking away easily. You know, they laughed at me walking away, saying, go pound your head against a brick wall, concrete wall for the rest of your life. You ain't going to make an impact on this world. It's untrue. I have. However, in a way, they're correct. It's like I do feel like I'm banging my head against that wall because people in the aggregate sense still are not really listening at all. That's why I need more help. And people who are doing this kind of work need a lot more help. We need help from you. You gotta be the next one up here. I don't want to do this forever. I don't want to do this myself. You know, forget about sitting in the audience. Get your stuff together, get your grammar together, and get up on the stage. That's what I want to say. The symbolism and trappings of the Christian devil or Satan are used in modern Satanism for two reasons. The first is to try to make outsiders see Satanism as, quote, just another quaint religious belief that is based upon traditional Christian belief systems. The second is to associate itself with the adversarial dynamic in nature, referred to as involution in the occult world, the force which opposes true evolution in consciousness by making us divided and contradictory in our own thoughts, emotions, and actions. The word Satan is derived from the Hebrew word shaitan, meaning adversary. That's shin tav nun, shaitan. It means adversary or opposer. Satanism is ultimately about being opposed to the true order of natural law. That's the adversarial force. Satanism works against the ordering force of natural law to bring in chaos, to usher in chaos and suffering. Fake Christians lack the common sense of conscience. This is the part where I'm going to try to attempt to explain the difference between true right and wrong versus arbitrarily deciding what right and wrong are. Conscience is the knowledge of the difference between right and wrong behavior. Conscience is not the behavior itself. People think conscience is behavior. It is not. Conscience is knowledge of the difference between right and wrong behavior. The exercise of conscience is the behavior. That's when we actually take it into the realm of action, when we exercise the knowledge that we have taken into ourselves through our behaviors, through our actions. Conscience is not the desire or intention to do the right thing. This misconception causes many people to believe that they themselves or others have conscience when they do not. Ladies and gentlemen, most of the people of this world do not possess conscience. It doesn't matter whether they think they have it or whether you think they have it. Because conscience is knowledge. And how many people actually do have the definitive, objective knowledge of the difference between right behavior and wrong behavior? How many could actually articulate it to someone else? How many people can actually define what a right is? Again, I've made this social challenge, this social experiment challenge. Go and ask people on the street what is a right, and they will not be able to define it. They will not be able to tell you. A right is an action which does not cause harm to another sentient being. They will not be able to give you that simple definition of a right. And if you don't know rights, you don't have conscience. And if you don't know rights, you're going to lose them. You're certainly not going to be able to protect what you don't even know. And it's not going to be with you for very long, if at all. Someone can have all the desire or intent in the world to do the right thing, but if they do not have the knowledge to do so, they can never succeed in actually doing that task, doing what is right. Look, I could say, hey, I want to build race cars. I really have the intention and desire to build race cars. But if I don't go and actually learn the tool set to build race cars and then actually practice and do it and build race cars and learn how to really do it for real, I'm never going to build a race car. You want to learn how to paint. You don't say, I have the intention to learn how to paint. You actually get involved and do it. This is what people don't understand about real conscience. It's not about saying I have the intention to do the right thing. It's actually about doing the right thing. Intention is meaningless. Action is everything. Intention is meaningless. Behavior is everything. A constant theme throughout my work. Knowing moral law and living it is entirely different from merely wanting to do so. And because of this, most people don't know what it means to be a truly good person. They have this nebulous idea of what it means to be good. And most people say, oh, that person is generally good. Well, do they know the difference between right and wrong? Do they use their free will to choose right over wrong in every moment of their life? Well, then don't tell me they're a good person if they're not doing that. Don't tell me order followers are good people. Don't tell me cops and military are good people. Order followers, by definition, cannot be good people. Zero. None. 100% blanket statement, absolute. If you're an order follower, you're not a good person. To be a good person means you follow conscience, not orders. It means you know the difference between right and wrong, and then you exercise that behavior by choosing willfully of your own knowledge the right behavior over the wrong behavior once you understand the difference between those two modalities of behavior. Order followers don't do that. They act on what somebody else told them to do. And that is morally wrong all the time. So the only good order follower was one who has stopped being an order follower. They're no longer that thing. So there is no such thing as a good order follower. Developing true conscience means that a person integrates within themselves the definitive and objective knowledge of the difference between right behavior and wrong behavior, empowering them to truly do what is right by choosing right behavior over wrong. Sadly, most modern-day Christians have a severely distorted understanding of conscience, where it comes from, or how to exercise it properly. The word conscience is derived from the Latin consciere. Now, very interesting, okay? I recently actually learned this. I knew that it came from con and sciere, which means to know together. Con means together or with, and sciere means to know. But I didn't know until recently what the verb consciere in its full context actually meant. The Latin verb consciere means to know well, to know in fullness, to know definitely. So, if somebody, he knows that information, well, you wouldn't say consciere, you would say sciere. But, whoa, he knows that. He's an absolute expert on that. He knows it deeply and in its fullness. Then you would say consciere, to know in its absolute fullness. In other words, to grok. How many people know Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land? How could I be bringing up all these great works of fiction and media and like two people know about it? Robert Heinlein, folks, Stranger in a Strange Land, one of the greatest science fiction stories about an anarchist that you will ever read. Please read it. Short novel. You know what I'm talking about. Okay. Yeah, Michael Grox. Yeah, okay. So, consciere means to grok or to understand in its fullness. And that's what conscience is, folks. To know it definitely in its fullness, the difference between right and wrong. So, that in turn comes from, as I said, con meaning together or with, and the Latin verb sciere meaning to know. Literally, conscience means to know together, to be all on the same common sense ground, all on the same page regarding what's right and wrong. In other words, to have common sense. It is all too uncommon and lacking in our world. If everyone knew the essential knowledge of conscience, we could establish the common sense understanding of morality on earth, where everybody understands right and wrong. But this is humanity's main stumbling block. It doesn't know definitely the common sense knowledge of conscience. The worldwide system of violence, theft, and coercion that exists now is built upon that ignorance. Natural law is not difficult to grasp, quote unquote, advanced spiritual teaching. Like I said in the morning session, folks, this is the remedial class. This is not the high-level spiritual stuff. This is the basic foundational building blocks of what you have to lay a foundation with to get to any higher levels of spirituality. This is the basic elementary foundation. People becoming aware of the knowledge of true conscience and aligning their actions with it is the only way to alleviate the self-inflicted suffering, the self-inflicted sufferings human beings have created in the world. I wish that common sense was more common. So, fake Christians' variant of morality. True morality versus arbitrary morality. This is the kind of morality that is often practiced in the Christian church, the so-called Christian church. They don't have morals. They have likes, dislikes, preferences, whims, and aesthetic likes. Things that they find pleasing or somehow repugnant. Immoral behavior, by definition, is coercive and violent behavior which causes harm to another being's life, rights, or property. Any action that does not infringe on another's rights or cause harm to a sentient being is a right. Actual wrongdoing is a violation of rights by some form of theft, murder, assault, rape, property theft, trespass, or coercion. Fake Christians will not accept such a standard from what they consider wrong, and will attempt to impose their own idea of morality onto a behavior or activity which they find distasteful or aesthetically unpleasant. Again, they're not teaching in their ranks what real right and wrong are. They're saying, oh, that woman's skirt is too short. That's wrong. That's immoral. They're not harming anybody. Oh, the fake Christian doesn't like people who smoke cannabis. They find it unpleasant and distasteful. Well, then don't smoke it. Don't tell me I can't or use it for healing of my body. It's like, that's a right. And they'll say, oh, no, that's immoral and a wrong. No. You want to consider it a vice because you find it repugnant or unpleasant. That doesn't mean it's a crime. A crime has to have a victim. There has to be a violation of rights for a crime to have been committed. They will then incorrectly label such, vice or repugnant behaviors as wrong or immoral just because they don't like or approve of them. Worst of all, they almost always want their preferences violently forced on by everybody else by government. They believe that the church can decide that vices are sins and the state can decide that vices are crimes. Neither of which is true. Such arbitrary morality is the freedom-destroying force of moral relativism at work in our world. This is what to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil really meant in the book of Genesis. It meant that you don't attempt to truly learn what right and wrong are inherently, but rather you consider yourself to be the arbiter or the decider of what right and wrong are according to your own liking. That is what to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil meant. It means you're propping yourself up as God and saying, I will decide what right and wrong are. And you know what that's called, folks? That's called Satanism. It's not Christianity. Now, don't tell me that Bush Jr., little boy Bush, the decider, was a Christian. He's a member of the old religion, if there ever was one, and his daddy's one of the big, high-level top priests in that religion. Absolute Satanist. Him and his father and his whole family. The sheriffs of the SS of Germany. High-level Nazism. Come over here to the United States and infect the intelligence agencies here. The exercise of discernment and judgment is another commonality shared by true Christians and lacking in the fake ones. The only leap of faith that a person must make is that truth exists and that you can know it. With truth, matters regarding morality can be discerned as true or false, and correct judgments can be made and acted upon. True Christians studied and obtained the knowledge necessary to discern truth from falsehood, which is required to exercise conscience. They employ this spiritual discernment without relying on any worldly governing authority to tell them what is right or to tell them what to do, least of all the church or the state. It is a false Christian idea not to judge other people's wrong and harmful behavior. This whole adage, judge not lest ye be judged. This is exactly the kind of looking the other way that has plunged our world into the abject slavery and chaos that represents the current human condition. Judge not lest ye be judged refers to judging according to your own likes or dislikes. Now, don't judge right and wrong for yourself. That's not for you to judge. That's for you to learn correctly, to get your grammar right about it, so that then you could get your rhetoric or your actions right about it. It referred to judging according to your own likes or dislikes, whims or preferences, what right and wrong happen to be. It does not mean to stay silent and not call other people out on their violent or coercive immoral behavior. This is why we're in the mess we're in. People won't say to each other, hey, you're wrong. You don't have the right to do these things. You don't have the right to coerce people like this. You don't have the right to violate people's rights like this. How many people have the balls to call people out on their bullshit like that? Not many. And lots in this room, yeah. Now, rhetorical question. I know we're here, yes. But I'm talking about out there, how many people have the balls to do that? Not that many people. They want to look the other way and they want to make excuses for other people. And that's just going to get us more of the same. True spirituality is rooted in true freedom. How many Christians will you go and ask, as I asked this morning, that will tell you that the ultimate goal of true spirituality is freedom? At all. Hardly any. And I mean freedom in all the senses. Spiritual freedom, mental freedom, and physical freedom. True Christians have the knowledge of the causal factors of the current human condition and know the universal law of freedom, that freedom and morality are directly proportional to each other. An authentic Christian understands that freedom is a natural right gifted by creation, and that freedom and spirituality are inherently connected and can never be separated from each other. Freedom is the purpose and goal of true spirituality. You know, how many Christians will say that or tell you that? They don't know it themselves, they don't care, they don't talk about freedom. Freedom's against their 501c3 tax-exempt status, as I'll get to. Freedom is the purpose and goal of true spirituality. Fake Christianity and the New Age movement constantly attempt to de-emphasize the role of knowledge and freedom. Morality is based in knowledge, and it is essential to freedom. When knowledge is de-emphasized and belief is heralded, it will always lead to a degradation of morality, and therefore a degradation of freedom, because morality and freedom are inseparably interconnected. We are given exoteric religion to distract us and keep us from having and exercising the common sense knowledge that can make us truly free. True Christians are deeply aware that genuine spirituality is all about freedom. Spiritual freedom, mental freedom, and physical freedom. Not just two of the three. Not just having your spirit be free and your mind be free, but free to, in the physical domain, exercise the rights that you have and that are yours to exercise. And not be infringed on those rights to exercise them. Not have your rights infringed by coercive efforts of government. That's what real freedom is. Freedom is the right to engage in an action that is not harmful to others unrestrained by others. It means no one comes along and says, hey, you can't communicate with this person. You can't engage free speech. Hey, you can't engage in this voluntary interaction with people. You can't sell them this and they wanted it and it's a voluntary exchange because you don't have a license to do it. That's not freedom. You know? Unrestrained by man in the physical domain. That has to be what real freedom encompasses as well. It's not just two of the three. The spiritual, mental, and physical freedom, body, mind, and spirit, all need to be present for true freedom to be present. 2 out of 3 is not good enough. The illusion of serving two masters. Matthew 6:24 says, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon, and you cannot serve God and the state simultaneously either. False Christians' true service is to the religions of authority and money. Many people who believe they're Christian serve authority and money in a far more loyal capacity than to their falsely claimed service to God and the message of Jesus. There is no higher contradiction than believing that man's law is somehow on par with or ordained by God's laws. This is pure cognitive dissonance and a noteworthy hallmark of a false authoritarian Christians, which is what I call them. The mammon-worshipping prosperity Christians are no better, invariably putting the God of money far higher than the God of creation in their warped belief systems. Because of the widespread practice of serving two masters in exoteric Christianity, you will never see any Christian ministers or preachers speaking out against things like usury or war, because such talk would both go against their true religion of money and authority, and it would threaten their 501c3 tax-exempt status. That is why these fake-ass Christians will never say anything out against the state. They will never speak out against immoral, aggressive war. They will never speak out against usury in banking institutions because they want that money rolling in off the collection plates, and they want it all. They don't want to have to say, hey, I'll criticize government, and then the government will say, okay, well, you have to pay us taxes then. No, government has a tight little arrangement with the religionists, the fake religionists, and they say, we'll give you tax-exempt status, but you can't say anything to your constituency bad about us. Don't ever tell them that we're the devil. Don't ever tell them that we're not in line with true Christianity. No. You'll never hear a fake-ass Christian minister saying any of those things. They love that mammon, and they worship it with all their heart and soul. So they'll tell you submit to the government, while they are completely at odds with themselves serving two masters, largely the God of money. The state, the police forces, the military, the so-called Constitution, which is just more man's law. Stop worshiping this shit. These are false gods. And all the false Christians just eat it up with a spoon and a straw. They can't get it in fast enough. They can't suck it down fast enough. Government is a cult and nothing more than a euphemism for slavery. A true Christian knows that everyone has the exact same rights, and no one has any more or less rights than anyone else. Everyone in this room, everyone throughout the world, everyone throughout the universe has exactly the same rights. Nobody has more rights than me or you. Nobody has less rights than me or you. A true Christian knows that since rights are not created by humanity, but are the birthright endowed to us by the creator of the universe, no human being or group of human beings can ever grant rights to or revoke rights from anyone else. You can't say, hey, listen, We know that murder and theft is wrong, but we're going to grant this group of people the ability to do these wrongdoings unrestrained from any kind of punishment, with total impunity. We're going to give them the license to be able to do these things. There's no such thing. This is a bullshit illusion. It's mind control. That's what it is. Anybody who believes in that nonsense is mind control. Okay? Right now, in this room, if I were standing instead of in Philadelphia in the state of New Jersey, I could be jailed for just being there with what I have upon my person. Now, I mean, tell me how you could do the same behavior in two different places, and in one place it's considered moral and a right, and in another place it's considered immoral, and you could be jailed and caged for it, or even killed if you refuse to comply. This is called bullshit moral relativism. And this is the total mentality of Satanism. Satanists think one thing could be right one place and wrong in another place, or right at one time and wrong at another time. They believe in relative morality. There's no such thing. This is called, all this equates to, all moral relativism like that equates to, which is what all man's law is based upon, is I'm God and I get to make up right and wrong at my whim. Let me tell you something. No one is that force, and no, they do not get to do that. A true Christian understands the truth that authority vested in man is inherently illegitimate, illusory, and immoral, and that government is simply a euphemism for slavery because it is based in coercion and violent behavior. Government is not just a euphemism for slavery, though. It is both a religion and a cult. Now, here's where the language gets even stronger. Government is not just slavery. It's not just a religion. It is a cult. This is a cult mentality, because the definition of a cult is a religion that is dangerous to the lives, rights, and freedoms of others who are not its members. A cult does actual violent deeds to beings that are not members of its ranks. And that is the definition of what government is. See, you can have a religion, and it's a ridiculous notion, it's a ridiculous belief system. You can have a religion that Fozzie Bear is the God of creation, and we're going to all bow down and worship Fozzie. Okay? And wonderful, have your ridiculous, nonsensical religion, because it's not harmful. This is where I say, even if you want to believe in pink elephants, and dancing fairy tales wandering through the sky, dancing fairies wandering through the sky, you're entitled to do that. You can be as wrong as you want. You could be as idiotic as you want, as long as the belief has nothing to do with the infringement of rights and freedom. Believing in government is not even a right. You don't have the right to even believe in that system of belief. Want to know why? Because it is affecting other people's freedom in the negative sense. There are thoughts that aren't rights. You don't have the right to think that someone else is a rightful slave. There is no right to believe that you yourself are a rightful slave. That is not a right. You don't have that right under creation to accept slavery, because that is the total rejection of the gift of free will, and that is immoral because it is harming other people's free will and freedom. That right does not exist in nature. This is why they don't want you to read the Founding Fathers' writings. They were telling people this in their writings. Some of the deepest philosophical works of man, whether you agree with some of the actions that they didn't go all the way into anarchy. I agree. They fell short of the standard. They needed to stop at the Declaration and never constitute a new government. Declare freedom and say anybody who wants to try to take it from us, come and try. That's freedom. See, it's liberty or death. That's the choice. That's it. That's what it means. You got to be willing to put it all on the line if you really want to be free and not have rulers. We're going to get to that level of sacrifice that this might take. So that's what a cult is. And that's why government is absolutely defined properly as a cult. Because it is a illusory, immoral belief system that does violence to people who are not its members. See, the difference between natural law and man's law is everything. Natural law is based upon truth and principles which are eternal. They're inherent to creation. They exist everywhere, at all times and places. Man's law is based on dogmatic beliefs, which are constructs of the illusory mind. Natural law, or karmic law, or moral law, or God's law, whatever you want to call it, is harmonized with due to knowledge and understanding. Man's law isn't harmonized with, it's complied with due to fear of punishment, of what will happen to you if you don't comply. Natural universal law is universal. It's cosmic. It exists everywhere in creation. It applies anywhere in the universe, regardless of time or location. Man's law differs with location based upon the whim of legislators. You could do one thing in one place, and you do it in another place, you could be caged. That's moral relativism. Natural law is eternal and immutable. It exists and applies for as long as the universe exists, and it cannot be changed by any force in the universe. No one is capable of changing natural law, or not being bound by it, for that matter. Man's law changes with time based upon the whim of legislators. So you look at prohibition in the 20s, alcohol was illegal, it was legal, it became illegal, and then it went back to being legal again. Well, was it immoral? Was it moral, became immoral, and then went back to being moral again? Is that what happened? You know, the people who made and consumed alcohol were moral people, and they had the right to do it. Then, for a brief time, that's an immoral act, and you're harming other people. And then, when they repealed prohibition, it became moral again, and it's okay to do it again, and you won't be caged for it. I mean, this is absolute ridiculous nonsense. A 3-year-old can figure out that that's bullshit. And adults who consider themselves adults can't. People are a joke. Most so-called Christians don't understand the slavery inherent to systems of government authority. I call them authoritarian Christians, and they're no Christians at all. They've bought into the outrightly satanic idea, which dark occultists placed into the biblical scriptures, that government is quote-unquote ordained by God. Once again, book Romans 13. These fake Christians do not understand that authority is an illusion of a diseased psyche based entirely in violence and built upon the erroneous and dogmatic belief that some people are the masters who have the, quote, moral right to issue commands, which they call their laws, while others are slaves who have a moral obligation to obey the masters. They have failed to see that the God of creation would never institute or condone government, because the God of creation does not want slavery for anyone. The God of creation wants freedom for everyone. And so-called Christians, need to understand that and get their head out from up their ass regarding their nonsensical and non-Christian belief in government. The only quotes outside of biblical scripture that I'm putting in this whole presentation, I'm going to compare myself and one of the founding fathers, James Madison, who, God bless him, he helped write the Second Amendment. He co-authored the Second Amendment with George Mason. And so thank God for those men. But he was a Federalist and he was a statist long term. And he said this: if men were angels, no government would be necessary. This is a quote from one of the founding fathers, James Madison. Let's see how James stacks up to me. And let's see who's a little bit more Christian.
I say, since humans aren't angels, and I certainly agree with that, none are fit to rule. Put that on my gravestone. That's got to go on my headstone. Only anarchists can possibly be true Christians. Now, how about that for an incendiary statement to the fake Christians out there? Only anarchists can possibly be true Christians. The word anarchy is derived from the Greek prefix an, meaning without or the absence of, and the Greek noun archon, ruler or master. Anarchy does not mean without rules. There are still rules in anarchy called natural law. It means without rulers, without masters. Anarchy means the absence of slavery, or in other words, true freedom. Only anarchists can ever possibly be true Christians. True anarchists reject the authority of man, the authority of government, and reject the concept of an intercessor between oneself and the Creator. And they take personal responsibility for their actions in this realm. Rejecting the imposed rule of the illusory authority of government, true anarchists align themselves with service to a higher power, the natural law of creation, from which all natural rights are ultimately derived. Now, don't get it twisted and think that the opposite logic applies. All anarchists are not necessarily true Christians. We also have to understand that, because Christianity involves more than just the rejection of authority. Real esoteric Christianity does. It's important to understand that one is not automatically a true Christian just because they consider themselves an anarchist. A person who rejects worldly authority must still possess and live in accordance with the moral knowledge of natural law and the golden rule to be considered a true Christian. Some may recognize the illegitimacy of man's authority and yet fail to understand natural law or to behave morally. Therefore, all true Christians are anarchists, but not all anarchists are necessarily Christian. I'll say that again. All true Christians must necessarily be anarchists. If you say that you are a Christian, you must recognize and identify with being an anarchist. Because that means you don't equate, you don't acknowledge or give any legitimacy to the authority of human beings, or man, or government. But not all anarchists are Christians, are not true Christians. Not all anarchists are. Only the ones who basically live according to natural moral law and the golden rule could be considered true Christians. Prosperity Christianity. Prosperity Christianity is the belief that one obtains riches and an extravagant lifestyle because they've somehow earned the favor of God. The ruling class occultists behind exoteric religion invented this spiritually degenerate belief system to try to make people believe that being greedy and ruthless and hoarding resources is some kind of a moral path in life. There are Christian ministers out there teaching this pure garbage, telling people that becoming like these multi-billionaire elitists who have the slightest inclination toward helping others is some sort of a Christian aspiration. And that if you achieve those kinds of worldly riches, that you've arrived as a Christian because God has favored you. True Christians know that enlightenment has nothing to do with pursuing greed, comfort, or bliss in a world filled with suffering. Pursuing your own pleasure and doing nothing to morally educate others is a satanic mindset. True Christians know that they have a moral obligation to care enough about what is wrong with our world to take real-world action to change it for the better. You know, here's these prosperity Christianity. Imposters. Living for the money, bilking people of their hard-earned money, breaking it in with these televangelists and their shows. I mean, it's pathetic and deplorable. And it goes directly against true Christian scripture. In the New Testament, book of Luke, Jesus said it is easier for the camel to pass through the eye of a needle for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And I have found this personally in life to be true. The people who have the most money don't care about what's going on because they love this system. They like it. They look at it like, hey, it's done well for me. I'm in a good position. Screw everybody else. Most people would trade places with the dark occult controllers of the world in a heartbeat. They would say, oh, you control everybody, you control the world, you're the masters of all these slaves. I trade places with you in a heartbeat. That's what they would say. Most people would make that deal. They want to be the controllers. They want to be the ruling class. They don't hate and want to bring it into the ruling class. They love the concept because they want it to be them. Salvation is Christianity. These fools believe that you can only be saved or attain salvation from suffering through faith alone, or by merely accepting Jesus as your personal Savior who died for our sins. In such a ridiculous spiritual worldview, actions become meaningless, and good works can't save you, as they'll say, since all that is required for your salvation is a certain belief, the belief that Jesus is God and is, died for your sins, for your repentance. True Christians care enough to take real-world action to create real-world change. Being saved from our self-imposed slavery will come in the form of knowing the difference between right and wrong behavior and then applying that knowledge through our actions. How about instead of looking at Jesus as someone to be worshipped or believed in as our Savior, we instead look at what He told us about how to actually live in the world, which is what can actually save us from slavery and annihilation. Zionist Christianity. I don't speak on the topic too much. I got into it in one particular podcast, but I'm going to say a bit about it here. Zionism is an elitist and racist political ideology based on Talmudic Judaism, a false form of the Judaic religion, false as Jews. Zionism has gone by many different names throughout the world, but it is essentially pure dark occultism at its core. Talmudic Judaism believes in the superiority of the Jewish race and religion and the slavery of, quote, lesser people who are not, quote, chosen by God, who they see as cattle and property. Zionism often hides behind traditional Judaism, using it as a scapegoat, while simultaneously doing harm to legitimate Torah-based Jews. While Zionists would insist that they are the polar opposite of the Nazis, their core ideology is virtually identical in belief and methodology to the religion of Nazism, with one of the only differences being which race is idealized as the master race, the Germanic race or the Jewish race. True Jews, true Torah studying and Torah-based Jews, I believe they're Hasidic Jews, reject Zionism. Here you see signs that say Judaism rejects Zionism in the state of Israel. Authentic rabbis always opposed Zionism in the state of Israel. Judaism rejects Zionism over and over again. And, the state of Israel and Zionist Jews do not want that coming out. They don't want that, understanding that real Orthodox and Hasidic Jews don't agree with the Zionist racist ideology. Zionism say Goyim were born only to serve us. That's what they call the non-Christian slave race. The non-Zionist slave race. That it exists only to serve them. They have no place in the world, only to serve the people of Israel. Zionist Christianity is a complete oxymoron in terms. Christian Zionism is an extremist and racist form of false Christianity in which religious fundamentalists identify themselves as Christian but believe in and follow Talmudic and Zionist ideology. These so-called Christians identify with the state of Israel and support everything that Israel does in the Middle East, including the slavery and genocide of the Palestinian people. Palestine is a land that was invaded by Zionists and taken by force, using the erroneous belief system of Zionist entitlement and superiority with the full backing of the British and U.S. militaries. Many fake Christians who are not self-described Christian Zionists also buy into some lower-level ideologies of Zionism, including the unquestioning support of the State of Israel on quote-unquote religious grounds. This is not true Christianity. Christianity doesn't support this type of political, racist ideology or invasion of people on their land. Christian socialism. I mean, there's a million different variants of false Christianity. No, that's real. That is a real socialist poster. And I'll tell you, they're all over this city. There's an infection in this city. Okay? This leftist communist city in particular is infested with these types of false Christians. An extremely disturbing trend in the late 20th and early 21st centuries is quote-unquote Christian socialism, another dangerous form of false Christianity. You cannot be a Christian and support socialism because socialism is the redistribution of wealth, of property, using government coercion and violence. Government coercion and violence. That's what socialists support. And don't give me this crap about democratic socialism either. It's all Marxist ideology and core mentality, which came out of dark occultism. There's another, you want to know another person that was, he was basically charged to write the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx and Engels. The dark occultists behind communism put these guys up to it so they could have their scapegoats. They didn't write that ideology. They were handed it. He said, here, publish this under your names. Was there not, the dark occultists who really put forward that sick crap, they're not putting their names on it. They're bloodline families that you're never learning their names. You can't be a Christian and support socialism because it's based in government coercion and violence. Socialist Christian youth clubs, they're popping up all over the place. They're a popular modern leftist trend blending socialist ideals with Christianity without the slightest knowledge or adherence to natural law, true morality, or the golden rule. This is a blatant cultural Marxist infiltration. Let me say that again. This is a blatant cultural Marxist infiltration of modern exoteric Christianity, and these so-called Christian leftists are growing in number, disturbingly so. It's a bigger problem than you think. Predeterminism, or why take any action when the outcome's already written? The false Christian doctrine of predeterminism wrongly asserts that the future is already written and must manifest in a certain way because it is willed and preordained by God. They believe that there is no point in trying to change the conditions here on earth because everything's already determined and the outcome is set in stone. This is another form of stand-down spirituality, as I like to call it. This isn't streetwise spirituality, it's stand-down spirituality. And this prevents right action and positive change from occurring. That's the very reason this false Christian belief system was put into place, to stop right action and positive change. It's part of what I call the worldview schism of randomness, which many scientists, scientismists, and atheists believe in. The occult's a grand accident. There's no creator. There's no underlying intelligence. There's no such thing as spiritual, moral, or natural law. Existence has no purpose other than to continue to exist. These are the hallmarks of scientism, atheism, and totalitarianism. The randomness, imbalanced worldview. Then on the other side, so that's the left brain egghead imbalanced worldview. The randomness left brain schism. Then you have the right brain religionist worldview imbalance, which is determinism. God controls every event in creation. All occurrences are preordained. Free will is an illusion. It doesn't really exist. Since God controls everything, change is impossible. It's all up to his will. And so action is ultimately meaningless. These are the hallmarks of religious extremism and slave think. The truth is somewhere in the middle. There is a random component to creation, and that is called free will. You can't put an algorithm on what somebody's actually going to choose in any given moment. It is random. If we align it to natural law, it will follow a pattern. However, there's still that. You're still not going to take away free will. You can still make a choice to do something that is chaotic or random. That's the random component in creation, free will. And then the deterministic component in creation is natural law. It's set in stone. It works 100% of the time, flawlessly, all the time, everywhere. But people, again, it's like, I'm going to piss everybody off because nobody can put me in their box, and I attack everybody on their nonsensical belief systems. So I don't care who doesn't like it. I don't want to be liked. I'm not here to be liked. I'm charged with telling the truth about what's going on, regardless of how hard it is to hear or who gets offended. Living for the afterlife. Huge numbers of fake Christians don't believe that this world is worth changing, and they're living only for a promise of reward of an afterlife in heaven with God. This is yet another belief inserted in early Christianity to take people who may have been positive agents for real change out of action. Stand down spirituality. Live for the next world. Live for your reward in heaven. Don't try to change anything here, though. The false Christian belief that earth is Satan's kingdom, so why should I care about it? Another false Christian notion which destroys positive change in our world is the idea that we live in Satan's realm, that the earth is Satan's kingdom and not a realm of free will. This idea convinces people that they are powerless and ineffective and should just submit and hand over our rights willingly. Some fake Christian sects actually welcome the ongoing social and environmental destruction of the earth because they believe this accelerating carnage means that the biblical tribulation of the prophesied end times is upon us, and salvation for the believers in the afterlife lies just beyond it, just around the corner. True Christians reject this foolish worldview and have instilled within themselves a deep recognition of the critical importance of both free will and personal responsibility. Now here's a section that I think some people will find interesting. The holy anointing oil and self-ownership. Jesus is widely known as a healer and performer of miracles from the New Testament stories of how he healed the sick. He's said to have performed miracles by healing, quote-unquote, incurable eye conditions and skin conditions. And he even healed people who were on the verge of death. Evidence is coming to light showing that it is quite probable that cannabis oil was the main healing agent used by Jesus or his disciples in his performance of these healing miracles. Almost all the representations of Jesus' companion, Mary Magdalene, show her holding a small vessel of oil, similar to what you might see in cannabis oil or cannabis oil extracts. I mean, this is a miracle plant, folks. It's probably the most medicinal plant on the surface of the earth, put there by the creator of the universe. Here's an image of Mary Magdalene, clearly showing her using some kind of a very viscous golden or a deep amber substance in some sort of crucible or vessel. The healing oil Jesus used was referred to as cannabisum. Now just think about that for a minute. The name of the healing anointing oil that is even referred to in biblical scripture was cannabisum. It comes from the Hebrew noun kana, transliterated K-A-N-E-H, which means reed, and the Hebrew adjective bosem, B-O-S-E-M, transliterated, meaning aromatic, which would very well describe what cannabis is. This oil was also referred to plainly as cannabis, K-A-N-N-A-B-U-S, instead of C-A-N-N-I-B-A-B-I-S. Okay? Almost identical in phonetic, pronunciation too. Just slightly different in spelling. Cannabis was continuously mistranslated in Hebrew as calamus, which is a useless reed. It would make complete sense that cannabis would be the substance Jesus used to heal, considering what we now know in the modern age regarding the plethora of diseases and conditions this miraculous plant is capable of treating and healing. Let me tell you something. Cannabis is the miracle plant. I mean, it's the cure for cancer, folks. I mean, if you don't know that by now, I mean, you're way behind. People have to watch the Rick Simpson story on YouTube. Now, this man was a saint. He's a saint in our modern times who healed so many thousands of people of cancer, it's almost uncountable. And what was his reward? What was his reward by the ruling authorities who, if you do good deeds, are going to praise you, right? They tortured this guy. They harassed him out of the United States to a point where he had to move to Croatia to keep healing people of cancer. I mean, the absolute trash that would take a man who's healing children of cancer and try to make a criminal out of him. Like I said, talk about people who deserve to be crucified. Here's some ancient depictions of Jesus showing him healing the sick with the cannabis plant shown close by in the scene. Clearly, the cannabis leaf. You know, and the fake-ass Christians will say, oh no, this is the devil's plan. Government needs to continue to ban and suppress this. Now, even today, it's still being done. People think, oh no, it's being legalized. No, it's not. People are still going to jail over cannabis. It's a disgrace. The trash that would throw somebody in a cage for their usage of a medicinal plant. Absolute moral trash. I mean, like when you start, you really get to me when you start preventing children from being healed. Like then I get into a murderous rage when I think about that shit. Cannabis is currently used to treat 700 medical conditions without the toxic side effects of pharmaceutical drugs. Imagine if doctors today could freely dispense this healing medicine without the repercussions of being placed into a cage through the false doctrine of man's law. When cannabis is used to treat all forms of cancer, when you see cannabis used to treat all forms of cancer, or see how it helps a child suffering from seizures to be able to start living normally again after just one dose of cannabis oil, you will understand what a miracle it truly is. I know someone who healed endometrial cancer, which is cancer of the lining of the uterus, with cannabis oil. Her doctors gave her a death sentence and said, go home, put your affairs in order, you have 6 months at best. And her husband said, bullshit, I'm healing my wife. Drove across the country, got cannabis oil from the Pacific Northwest, took it back to her. I believe in, somewhere around the middle states, Missouri or Kansas, I believe. And she was healed in 45 days. 45 days, no traces of cancer in the body. And when her doctor heard about what she did and how she did it, he said, I can't see you as my patient anymore. Wouldn't even monitor her condition to make sure it was still in check and not coming back because she was using a quote-unquote illegal substance. And not the absolute poison that chemotherapy is. I don't get into this topic as much because you see this sets me off. One day I'll get a hold of one of these people. A true Christian would always support the right of self-ownership and one's right to do as they please with their own consciousness, so long as they harm no one else. True Christians would also support and defend the right of sick people to access a plant created by God to ease and end suffering. And no true Christian would deny that right. The idea that I'm saved and that's all that matters. Another false Christian belief. Many fake-ass Christians hold the belief that as long as their life is going well and they accept Jesus, that they're saved and they're spiritually complete and that's all that matters. Too bad for all the rest of the sinners. This is not at all what Christianity or any form of spirituality for that matter is about. True spirituality encompasses self-care and personal betterment, but also recognizes the law of one, that we are all connected, that everyone is suffering if anyone is suffering. That is the law of one. If one suffers, all are suffering. So we must develop the responsibility to help others become aware by passing along the knowledge that we've learned so that everyone can work toward spiritual betterment and healing. And here's this notion encapsulated in a pretty funny cartoon. You know, these guys are bailing out this boat on one side, the other guys are up at the top of the boat that's sinking, and they're saying, sure glad the hole isn't at our end. They get the face palm, the Jesus face palm. Who did Jesus oppose and expose? The three worldly dynamics that Jesus actually fought against during his lifetime, as described in the New Testament, were what I call the unholy trinity: religion, money, and government. He challenged the established religious orders of his day, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He took great issue with the usury of the temple money changers, who were the established financial order of his day. And of course, he was convicted and crucified by the Roman government at the behest of the religious and monetary powers. This example, which faith Christians never talk about, also serves to illustrate where the true power of the control system ultimately lies. Who ultimately petitioned the government to crucify Jesus? The religious orders. And they were working at the behest of the monetary system as well, in collusion with the monetary system, I should say. But ultimately, who persuaded Pilate and the Romans to perform the crucifixion? If you believe in the physical, historical crucifixion, it was done by the religious orders, the dark occultists, the priest class. He went into the temple and took out a switch and whipped the money changers and said, get the hell out of here. Usurers. You know? Churches won't even talk of usury today at all. Won't even mention it. And there's who ultimately did the very deed of the crucifixion. But wait a minute. Did they? Did the actual government authorities do it? We'll get to that. This is the unholy trinity. Religion is the father of the trinity. It's thought control. It perpetuates ignorance. It's based upon belief. That's the real big daddy right there, is religion. Controlled by a dark occult priest class. It's the essence of all mind control and the basis for the old world order of total control and enslavement. Money is the mother of the unholy trinity. It's emotional control. It gets our emotions focused on wanting this, on the desire for more and more of it. It perpetuates apathy. Most people, as long as they have money, don't care about anything else. It's the new God to which human beings now entirely devote their care, attention, and energy. The ultimate religion. Money is an even more widespread religion than government and authority. More people believe in money as a religion than they do authority. It's the basis for the New World Order. It's the ushering in, or it's that which gives birth to the New World Order because of what people will do for money. Government is the child. It's the ultimate manifestation that comes from the father and the mother. It's the control of the physical body, physical slavery. It perpetuates cowardice. It is based upon the erroneous belief in authority, and it is the violent enforcer for father and mother. The dark occultists and the banksters. Government is the New World Order. Here is who actually did the deed of the crucifixion of Christ. The police murdered Christ. Now, I say this to so-called Christians, and they look at me like I have an 8-headed hydra growing out of the side of my neck. What? What are you talking about? The police killed Jesus. Absolutely. The police murdered Jesus. The police force of the Roman Empire were ultimately responsible for the death of Jesus Christ. The centurion, and again, whether you believe in this as a historical story or a historical account or an allegorical story, it doesn't matter. The centurions were the Roman police force. They were actually responsible for the death of Jesus. They're the ones who actually did the crucifixion when Pontius Pilate gave them the order. The centurions, the Roman soldiers and police force of their day, killed Jesus, following orders of the Sadducees and Pharisees in collusion with the money changers and the Roman government. Subservience to the state is a false doctrine still believed in by fake Christians today, even in spite of Christ's lifelong battle against and murder by the state's law enforcement agents, clearly described in their very own scriptures. And they can't see it. They can't see that the police killed Christ. Just doing our job, Mr. Jesus. Quit breaking the law and this wouldn't happen. Can't you just hear them saying it? I know I can. Modern police are blocking Christ's work with violence. This is actively taking place as we speak. Another thing that sets me off into violent murders, rampage, red Hulk zone. Okay? I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I cannot tolerate. I cannot stand thinking about it. I try not to subject myself to reading more and more about it. Because at some point I will explode and take out my aggression on these people when this control system comes down. And they will pay for what they have done. In the physical world, through action. Karma's not going to get them. Real world people are going to get them. Government has outlawed the feeding of the homeless, and Christians everywhere are silent, doing nothing about it. Homelessness is now illegal in some places. You don't even hear about this in the church. These false preachers. You don't hear about it in a synagogue, a mosque, a Buddhist temple, nowhere in religion will they even talk about this happening. People of a self-proclaimed moral religion are doing nothing when Christ's very word is being murdered by immoral, order-following trash. And I'll say it just like that because I have the balls to. It's a disgrace. And Christians who abide by it are an absolute disgrace. They're as big a piece of trash as those police who are stopping the feeding of homeless people are. Trash. Institutionalized pedophilia and its protectors. Let me tell you something. These guys don't get me as angry as these guys get me. They don't get me as angry as the police stopping the feeding of the homeless or the curing of sick children. These guys are just psychopathic animals. It's like getting mad at a tiger for eating a baby in a village. They're animals. They just need to be put down like a ravenous beast, period. The other people are claiming that they're somehow moral and doing something good while they're shutting down good works. You watch Cannabis Destiny, the documentary called Cannabis Destiny, you will be sick at the end of it. An 8-year-old dies because the police stop the coming in of his cannabis medication. Let me tell you something. Thank God I don't have children. Because I would murderously protect my children and their rights if I had any. I'm telling you, if anybody tried to stop my child from being healed, you are going to get filled with holes. Filled with holes. That's why maybe it's better off I don't have children. But that's how protective I would be of my child. The plague of pedophile priests is an extreme crisis throughout the world. The greater so-called Christian community does not believe that this systematic problem is an epidemic and will not investigate and pursue these criminals. They defer to the judgment of the corrupt, pedophile-infested Vatican and to the police forces, which have a track record of protecting pedophilia and even participating in it. Let me tell you something. The police were the ones that were involved in the satanic grottos that I participated in rituals with were protecting the Satanists. They were working with and protecting the Satanists. And I tell people a story of, at a ritual at Valparaiso in 1997, I attended a ritual in Whitehall, Maryland, northern Maryland, just south of the Pennsylvania-Maryland border. And it was in a McMansion in Maryland, okay? Like, far beyond just a regular upper-class house, high upper class. But not like what you would call like a Rothschild-style mansion. Very, very big home, lots of open space, lots of land surrounding it. And they had a satanic ritual in this home, in the basement. Then afterward, food and refreshments were served, and the Satanists were just gathering and talking and planning. And outside the ritual house for the entire time was a Maryland trooper guarding the home for the satanic ritual. And inside, a Satanist was watching him guard the home through the glass window of like the atrium while he was eating, talking to me, laughing hilariously, hysterically, maniacally at this cop, saying, there are dogs, there are animals, there are cattle, and they protect us. They do our bidding and protect us. They don't even understand how we use them. We use them like trash that they are, throw them away, and they'll continue to protect us just as we throw them some worthless pieces of paper. Laughing hysterically at the cop, who was one of his minion order followers, knew how much absolute control he had over this being's mind, and was just absolutely mocking him at a spirit level. And that's what they do, and what they're rewarded with is more loyalty from their dogs. They are there to serve and protect the ruling class, the pedophile priest class. That's what the police are there to do. The Catholic Church continues to also protect and enable pedophile priests, paying off the families and then moving the offender priests to new parishes so they can repeat the offenses all over again. The institutions of church and state in collusion with organized crime syndicates worldwide are the enablers, contributors, and protectors of vicious criminal pedophiles throughout the world. Every dime placed into their collection plate contributes to funding this unholy corruption. The church moves these parasites from parish to parish to cover up their crimes and then pays off the victim's family in exchange for their silence. The families accepting these payoffs are as rotten as those committing these heinous crimes, possibly even more so, as they would allow it to happen to their own children, who they are the stewards of to protect. Let me tell you something. These organizations are working worldwide organized crime, mafia, gang syndicates to traffic these children. And until people grow the balls to physically stop them, they're going to continue to do what they do, because they are just animals who do what they do. Use your imagination on what I mean by that, folks, and get as creative as you want. What turn the other cheek really means. The New Testament adage to turn the other cheek meant continuing to try to bring the truth to people you care about over and over, even if you are rejected, ridiculed, called crazy, etc. It meant to endure that type of rejection of your message of truth so that you could plant a seed that may eventually sprout and grow in others to the point where they awaken and realize what you are teaching them. That's what turn the other cheek means. Fake Christians teach that we should engage in unconditional forgiveness without the moral prerequisite of contrition, meaning that someone else is actually sorry for what they have done. That's not true forgiveness. That's what the false Christian version of turning the other cheek will get you. It will help even out the scars on your face. True forgiveness does not mean continuing to excuse the willful commission of wrongdoing an infinite number of times. That is naivete at best and cooperation with evil at worst. True forgiveness is different than quote-unquote letting go or accepting that violent action has occurred and cannot be undone. True forgiveness is always a two-way street, involving remorse or contrition on the part of the wrongdoer, and a willingness to tell the truth regarding the wrong that they have done and cease engagement in their previous violent behavior. That is where true forgiveness and reconciliation must always begin, with an act of contrition. Pacifism, an antichrist if there ever was one. Pacifism is without any question the most deplorable and self-loathing ideology on the face of the earth. I would say pacifism is more deplorable and self-loathing than Satanism. If you gave me the choice of what kind of people to hang out with, pacifists or Satanists, I'd take the Satanists in a heartbeat. Because you know why? At least they aren't going to let themselves get shit on over and over again. Whereas a pacifist will, because they hate themselves. They're self-loathing creatures, and they want the suffering that a psychopath will inflict upon them. That's how deplorable a pacifist is. Jesus was absolutely not a pacifist. Get that through your head, fake Christians out there. A pacifist is a person who will never act with force to defend themselves or anyone else under any circumstances. This ideology paves the way for submission and slavery of all mankind to the will of psychopaths who would violate their sovereignty and rights endlessly. Pacifists do not understand the difference between violence, which is coercive and wrong behavior in which no one should ever engage, and self-defensive force, which is a right that is unfortunately often necessary to prevent life and rights against those who would violate life and rights without the right to do so. Pacifism is nothing more than a euphemism for victim mentality, and it has nothing to do with true Christianity. Pacifists will turn us all into victims. Pacifists get conquered and eaten. That's what happens to pacifists. See, a pacifist doesn't have any real, true, deep internal self-care. Because if they did, they'd take action against someone oppressing them and taking their rights away from them. That's because they love themselves and they love others enough to say, you're not taking my rights or anyone else's. And if I have to engage you in the physical domain, I'll do that. No true Christian would ever claim to be a pacifist. Pacifists would let all forms of evil in this world run amok. The New Testament adage to love your enemies was meant to be taken at a spirit-level understanding, not a literal one. See, I could look at an absolute enemy coming for my rights and freedom and say, guess what? I love you at the spiritual level, the spiritual domain level, but you can't stay here. Okay? And then take them out if they refuse to stop violating rights. I love those people at a spiritual level domain because I know they're broken souls. But that doesn't mean I'm going to let you continue to let evil just continue unchallenged. There's nothing Christian in that. There's nothing holy in that. There's nothing good in that. At worst, this was another example of enemy provisions written into the scriptures by the enemies of true Christians themselves. Love your enemies is meant to represent sympathizing with just how destroyed someone must be at the soul level to do the kinds of evil acts which they are doing. It did not mean to just allow them to continue doing evil unchallenged and with total impunity. Jesus also did not advocate pacifism in the mental and spiritual sense. He did not teach aware people to just allow others to be complacent in their ignorance. because he knew the interconnectedness of all people, and he knew what kind of evil such ignorance would breed for everyone. This is the idea that someone, will say, oh, everybody has a right to their ignorance. No, they don't. They have a right to certain kinds of ignorance. I can be ignorant of how to make a clay vessel with, pottery clay. I have the perfect right to remain ignorant of not knowing how to do pottery. I do not have the right to be ignorant of freedom, what freedom really means, what my rights really are, what your rights really are. That right does not exist in nature, ladies and gentlemen. He knew that kind of ignorance in others would just breed absolute destruction and chaos for everyone in the world. Here's what he said regarding mental and spiritual, quote, pacifism. Do not think that I have come to bring peace upon the earth. I did not come to bring peace on the earth, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's foes shall exist within his own household. He that loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. He that loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. This means that if you want to accept lies, you will have to be on your own. Even if you're somebody's members of their own family. When the time comes, when the time really comes, to have to do something to take real world action against the violation of your rights and actions that are leading to your enslavement. Jesus advocating righteous rebellion against a false authority, even possible armed conflict in support of truth. There is such a thing as righteous rebellion, a form of self-defense carried out in protection of individual sovereignty against false claims of authority and rulership. Early Christians were actually militants against the Roman government and maintained a state of readiness similar to a militia. Jesus told his early followers to keep themselves prepared at all times with a purse, meaning a supply of coin or money used at that time. To stay supplied with a bag or what was known as a scrip, a small bag that could be taken with you on the move, a bug-out bag in other words, containing food, money, tools, utensils, and other supplies. And he told them to stay ready with a sword. And this is not an allegory. He meant a physical Roman sword. The standard military issue of the day. The New Testament even emphasized just how important he felt owning a Roman military sword was, as he told his disciples that if they did not have enough money for a sword, to literally sell their clothes and buy, to make enough money to be able to afford to buy a Roman sword. And I'll tell you the same thing about a battle rifle, folks. If you don't know how to use a battle rifle, you are asking to absolutely be exterminated. And this is why they want to take guns away from people. And guess what? They will never, ever get that accomplished in the United States of America. Never. Not without so much bloodshed that it would turn the goddamn earth red. The whole earth would be red, up to your neck. Trust me, Americans ain't ever given up their guns without war. This was not an allegorical statement, as many fake Christians constantly attempt to claim. Get your battle rifles and never give them up. People should know how to use military-style weapons. If you consider yourself a freedom activist, a true Christian, you should know how to use military-style weapons to defend yourself and your loved ones against evil in the world. Change what we should and accept what we must. This is true spiritual discernment. The act of, quote-unquote, accepting Christ in fake Christianity somehow magically absolves someone of all their sin without having to change their mind, their heart, or their behavior, or even learn the knowledge of what it means to be Christ-like, which is what the real acceptance of Christ is all about. All of the responsibility is externalized and placed upon the figure of Jesus, who, quote-unquote, died for our sins, so that we could be absolved of our personal responsibility for the continually degrading conditions of the world all around us. This false Christian dogma is the ultimate cop-out and impedes real work, positive change at every level. Gandhi said about these types of fake Christians, "I like your Christ, but I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ." This is what I call the ministry of no responsibility. You know, we just have to believe in something. We don't need to actually do any real good works in the world. The original wording of the Prayer of Serenity by Reinhold Niebuhr summarizes an understanding of the spiritual concept of acceptance versus change extremely well. It states, quote, "God, give me grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, the courage to change the things which should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from the other." Beautiful wording for a prayer. This prayer shows us the type of discernment that we require. While slavery is the current human condition, this condition can and should be changed, not accepted. The laws of nature, however, cannot be changed. Humanity has not yet willed the human condition to change because we continue to ignore the laws of nature, which govern the consequences of the human condition. Accept what we can't change and change what we can't and shouldn't accept. True Christians possess discernment regarding what should be changed and that which cannot be changed. They recognize the immutable laws of the universe and work in unison with those laws to change the current human condition using the power of will. "I will" is the most powerful phrase we can speak to create real manifested change in the world. Speak it, but then go out and do it. Understanding the causal factors and universal laws helps us to change our manifested reality from the causal level, the only place from which it is possible ever to change the effect. This is the difference between the plane of causality and the plane of effects. The plane of causality is the why that underlies and precedes all manifested reality. All power to effect change lies here. And thus, this is where our consciousness must go, to the understanding of underlying causal factors. The plane of effects you cannot change anything from. That's where the manifested realities which have already formed, already hardened and compressed and formed in the physical domain, have happened because of their causes. No power to effect change lies in the plane of effects. Unfortunately, this is where human consciousness seems to be trapped. We need to understand causality. True education is the only solution. I'm getting ready to wrap up now with some of the final concepts about how we can really get out of this mess. Helping to alleviate ignorance is the best way to help alleviate the suffering in this world, because the main causal factor of all that suffering is firmly rooted in ignorance. A true Christian uses their spiritual knowledge and enlightenment to influence the improvement of others. There are endless sorts of works and efforts that people decide to become involved with, endless charities and whatnot, that only ever treat the symptoms of suffering from the plane of effects. And so they are ineffective in the long term because they do not address the issues of spiritual knowledge and consciousness in the realm of causation. The endless stream of self-inflicted suffering will continue until the underlying cause is identified and alleviated, which is always accomplished by transforming ignorance into knowledge through true education. And this is why conscious parenting is so important if one considers themselves a true Christian. Manly P. Hall said, "It is not the wrath of the Almighty, but the stupidity of man that is causing most of the trouble." Jesus became a teacher in his ministry because he recognized that was the most effective way to alleviate human self-inflicted suffering, and it is the same reason I became a spiritual teacher. I decided when I understood Satanism at a fundamental level, I understood these people were in control of the world, I asked myself, what is the best way to help? And the best way to help is through true education of the masses of people. And without that education becoming common sense and morality in the masses of people, we're never getting out of this slavery. This is what was meant in the allegorical story of the wedding feast at Cana, when Jesus turned water into wine. He performed alchemical transformation in consciousness. If the so-called Christians and the so-called truth movement, for that matter, focus their grassroots efforts and resources into a worldwide campaign to teach the truth of universal, cosmic, moral, natural law to everyone, think of how many people could be reached with a message of self-improvement, conscience, and freedom. For everyone to know the truth of natural law will truly make us free. That's the dynamic that has to be taught and learned. We need to expose the work of darkness. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1 says, "Take no part in the worthless deeds of evil and darkness, but instead expose them." At this time in history, doing nothing regarding the ongoing destruction of human freedom is complicity with such evil. Staying silent is complicity with evil at this point, folks. How many so-called Christians are speaking openly about such dynamics in our world? Barely a handful. They're totally silent and complicit. One cannot go to many churches throughout the world and hear about the globalist agenda for a dark new world order of slavery. You're not going to hear that in the churches. You're going to hear, just pass the collection plate down, put the money in the plate. That's what you're going to hear. So-called Christians barely discuss such topics, let alone attempt to get down to the root causal factors of evil. Even fewer attempt to expose that evil. They say nothing and do nothing. Real Christians do the great work of creation by exposing the works of darkness for all to see, hear, and understand. If you're not doing that great work of exposing evil, you're not a real Christian. Natural law is the law of one. It is the core underpinnings of all true morality and thus the core underpinnings of true Christianity and true spirituality. Morality is inseparably tied to freedom and to order. And immorality is inseparably tied to slavery and to chaos. It is impossible to escape this universal law because at the highest level of our reality, everything is connected, fundamentally connected. Every being is connected to every other being through the law of one, such that when one suffers, all are suffering. True Christians know that the true self is pure eternal consciousness, and that we are spiritual beings having an experience in the physical world to learn and grow in consciousness. They know that the true self has a universal connection to the all, so that our actions affect everyone, and they echo in eternity. True Christians recognize the imperative need for true and objective morality during this time of crisis in which we now live. True Christians study and understand natural law so that they align their actions to true moral behavior. They reject the trappings of exoteric religion and understand occulted esoteric knowledge and how it has been used to enslave humanity. True Christians reject the illegitimate authority of any human being over any other human being. No masters, no slaves. Most of all, true Christians teach all of these truths to others because they know that the ignorance of anyone affects the freedom of everyone. Lex Rex, natural law is king. A true Christian embraces peace and the non-aggression principle. See, a true Christian is peaceful, but not a pacifist. Filled with the spirit of peace, but ready to take self-defensive action against evil at any moment. That's what really embodying peaceful behavior is. They hold life and freedom to be sacred, and they have a deep reverence for integrating true conscience into their lives by choosing right action for themselves. This is why Jesus is allegorically said to sit at the right hand of God's throne. The universal moral law of the universe is the only king of creation, and Christ's consciousness is its herald, which ushers in the understanding and practice of natural law and the respect and preservation of free will and individual sovereignty for all humankind. God's plan for everyone is the great work of ending slavery. That is God's plan. It is our shared responsibility at this time to help awaken others by continuously speaking the truth unapologetically, even if we feel burdened by this task, and even if it makes all of those involved feel uncomfortable. Courage and persistence are required to perform this task. The true great work is the arduous task of influencing others to awaken to the truth. It is to help them to realize that in supporting and condoning the illegitimacy of authority, in supporting and condoning the legitimacy of authority in government, man's law, that they have actually been supporting and condoning the legitimacy of slavery, and that they were immoral for having done so. In short, what the great work comes down to is to help people to abandon their false religions, their erroneous and dogmatic beliefs which hold back the progress of human consciousness by impeding the reception of truth and natural law. The slavery of humanity is the problem, and the only solution is to live in accordance with natural law. Sacrifice may be required to attain true freedom, however, folks. And that's what is meant by the crucifixion of Jesus in the New Testament. The word sacrifice is derived from the Latin adjective sacre, meaning holy or sacred, and the Latin verb facere, meaning to create or to make. A true sacrifice made for the right reasons could be said to be a truly sacred deed. Sometimes we must recognize when it is time to give everything, possibly even our lives, to do the right thing and to make room for new growth. And thank God, men and women who are our ancestors in our past made that ultimate sacrifice. This kind of noble sacrifice is the ultimate act of courage, and that is why Jesus was said to be the Lion of Judea. The Holy Trinity of esoteric Christianity lies within the self. It is not externalized. It is about our thoughts, emotions, and actions, our body, mind, and spirit. We find the true Trinity by looking within and aligning our thoughts, our emotions, and actions such that we are a being, that as we think, so we feel, so we act, and there is no contradiction between those three modes of consciousness. That is an act of true self-respect, and that comes from long and deep introspection of looking at oneself. True Christianity is about constant improvement, but never about being perfect, never about perfection. As I talked about earlier today, I'm the farthest thing from perfect. I don't claim to be perfect, and no one else should either. We are in the physical domain. We are flawed human beings at some level, and we're not perfect. We're not God-like entities. Okay? To make the journey from a fake Christian to a true Christian requires one to unsubscribe from all from all of the previously outlined hallmark factors of false Christianity, and to move forward in consciousness with the knowledge that being enlightened, regardless of what is taking place, regarding what is taking place both within ourselves and in the world around us, does not equate to perfection. There is no such thing in this dimension of being. No such thing as perfection in this dimension of being. Christ consciousness is a living embodiment of natural law principles to which one must endeavor to align their behavior, so that our individual and collective choices will not generate self-inflicted suffering. Religious icons like Jesus, Buddha, and others are often propped up as being beings of perfection or having lived perfect lives. And all this serves to do is nothing but create impossible standards to live by that seem unattainable to the average person. And so what that does is it dissuades them from even trying. That's what a lot of exoteric religion does to people. It says, oh, I'm supposed to be compared against this standard? Why bother even trying to do anything? I'll never attain that. Because it's not about living a perfect life. We stumble, we fall. And you got to pick yourself up and move on and do better the next day. The true standard by which we should be living is not to be perfect, but to try to be better than you were yesterday and keep moving forward. That's what walking the true spiritual path really is all about. Finally, the Sacred Heart of esoteric Christianity. Because that's what this is all about, folks. This is about love. This is about loving oneself, such that you will not allow your rights to be disrespected, your sacred God-given rights. This is about the love of others to help take them out of their ignorance so you stop creating self-inflicted suffering. This is about worldwide love in the sense of agape. Love that goes beyond romantic love and goes beyond the love of even brother and sister or family member. It is the love of truth. And it is the love of doing what is right. Jesus said, if ye continue in my word, then are ye my disciples indeed. That is the essence of the true Sacred Heart of Christianity right there. Freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your kind attention today.